You're listening to Radio Primavera Sound, proudly presented by Cupra.
Welcome once again to Line Noise, and today we are celebrating, I think, one of the most important record labels of the last few decades in British music, maybe in music as a whole. We're talking about Tectonic, a label that kind of emerged from dubstep. It's the work, the man behind it was Pinch, of course, and has released just so many classic records over the time. And this year is celebrating its 20th anniversary. So I spoke to Pinch, who is the label boss, about it. And we spoke about kind of what it takes to survive that long as a record label, key moments. We spoke about his own classic album, Underwater Dancehall. We kind of spoke about dubstep and what the term actually means, and post-dubstep and UK bass and that kind of thing. And there is a new compilation coming out to mark 20 years, which it's an incredible kind of lineup. It's basically lots of artists, some who you definitely associate with Tectonic sound, some maybe less so, and they're all kind of doing their interpretation of the label's sound. They're also doing various parties. I won't quite be in time for the launch party on July the 18th and 19th, but they're doing a party on October the 4th, which we talk about as well, which has got Metalheads and Iration Steppers, which is going to be amazing. We talk quite a bit about reggae, actually, about Adrian Sherwood and that kind of thing. Look, I really hope you enjoy my conversation with Pinch. It really was a pleasure to talk about such an incredible label. Thank you so much for doing this. It's a real pleasure. I just wanted to start, how on earth does it feel that Tectonic is celebrating 20 years of life?
Yeah, it's kind of surreal. It's almost half my life even. To sort of think back over the 20 years, obviously a lot of things have changed in the world and in my life. But Tectonic is a kind of an element of a constant throughout that. So it's been there with me and I've been doing it for all this time. So yeah, it's I'm not really a big fan of these, we've got a round number, let's do something. But I have to say, in this particular instance, I think it was a good opportunity to just sort of take stock for a moment and reflect on it, because yeah, it is a quite a significant amount of time.
I mean, I am quite a fan of these round number, let's celebrate it. I think that's kind of the way my brain works. It's like 20 years. But yeah, no, you're right that it has, it's good to take stock. I mean, did you even have a notion, when you started off, that this day would arrive?
I couldn't see past the end of my nose at that point, to be honest with you. And just to put it into context, I remember talking with some friends, because the whole concept of setting up and running a label was kind of new to me. And when you get because it was all vinyl sales predominantly back then, before there was the option to sell music digitally, vinyl and CDs. So with the vinyl, you would get the catalog number etched in the center, and we had to sort of had to decide what the catalog prefix would be. So it was TEC for Tectonic. And then we were talking about how many zeros there would be, because, 0, 1, it's like, we're going to do more than 99 releases? Probably not. But then just in case, we did luckily do 3 zeros. So we can keep some consistency on that. But yeah, I mean, it was a time when I had no idea how things would unfold, and I'd still be here running the label 20 years later.
But it took off quite immediately, didn't it?
I mean, we had some success, and I think how you measure these things is there's a lot of different ways of going about it. It certainly didn't make anyone rich, but it was definitely well received from the offset. I mean, at the time, most people hadn't, the idea of dubstep wasn't even something that had crossed people's consciousness. So I can remember having conversations about distribution and things, and to sell 500 records was a success story back then, basically. But yeah, it got picked up on. That first release was played by Marianne Hobbs, and to hear something that was made in a bedroom studio getting played out on radio was kind of quite an achievement, to be honest. So yeah, it opened doors, and I think by the first few years of the label, I'm doing a lot of these kind of like having conversations and reflecting on that early period, and that first sort of few years, there was a lot of great releases that have really resonated in people's memories. So yeah, we did all right from the offset.
I mean, the first release was by yourself and P. Dutty. Did you always sort of think of the label, I mean, as being for other people's music as well as your own?
Oh, definitely. I mean, to put it into context, I mean, around that time, there was literally just a handful of dubstep releases that you could buy and play off records. So if you wanted to play a whole 60-minute set and not play the same records over and over that everyone had already got, you had to cut and play dub plates. So the majority of the music existed as unreleased music on dub plate. And I think, just to put it simply, when I was going to the Forward events, which was in London, that was the first sort of regular dubstep event, and meeting people, and it was kind of like there was a sort of element of trade, and I wanted to make tunes that I could trade and have something to offer other people, so I could get some more unreleased music from other people as well, but it was important to start the label, I think, with an offering that came from myself, and I wanted to start things off like that. But the ambition was always to be putting out some of this incredible unreleased music that was just sitting on dubplate.
I think it's very interesting, like the kind of time, those early dubstep years, because you were part of something right from the start that would go on to, be like really big. How did it feel in those early years?
It was pretty exciting. I mean, the first few years, it was like a secret music geeks club that nobody really knew about. To put it simply, there was probably 100 to 150 regulars that would go to Forward, and then later sort of DMZ, and would pick up a little bit more. So it was kind of quite insular, and it wasn't something that most people even had any idea that it was going on. And it wasn't really until sort of 2006 when, and again, Marianne Hobbs's infamous now Dubstep Wars show, which really kind of broke out to a wider audience at the time. And then it kind of started on a bit of a kind of more international trajectory. It was getting bookings abroad and, going to all sorts of exciting places, America and around Europe. And, it did feel from that point onwards like a kind of a trajectory where it was constantly in lift-off status. It was just getting bigger and bigger, and new milestones were being achieved for the music and the scene as a large. So yeah, it was kind of really surprising, to be honest with you, and it was great to be a part of it. It was a very exciting time.
I was going to ask, actually, if I may, like, what do you make of the dubstep name now? Because I mean, it's been. There was a moment when it was associated with music that I didn't particularly like, and there was a moment when it was associated with music I really, really like. Like, what did you ever sort of feel a bit weird about the name?
Well, my experience of it was being part of something that was, a very kind of, it was very special and important to me. It was a time when, those earlier days, the music had a kind of more of a deeper, almost, the tag phrase at DMZ was "come meditate on the bass weight." And that kind of encapsulated a really important concept around the music. I think there was a lot of interesting percussive energy, but there was this sense of, it was kind of journey music. It wasn't something that was necessarily about setting off fireworks and having a massive stage show as loads of people bang around to incredible strobe lights going off and all this sort of thing, which I think there was a period when globally it had taken on the excitement that had been built up around this new type of music called dubstep, and then it ran off into this more sort of EDM framework of how it sounded, and the kind of audiences were getting bigger and bigger, and it became more of a kind of festival show type music in that later period. And yeah, it got to a point where the word dubstep meant something different to the majority of people than what it meant to the people who were there in the beginning in the UK side of things. So there was definitely that change, and I think there's been a lot of correction about that in more recent years, and there's younger generations who are engaged and interested in what I would consider to be a more authentic take on the use of the name, which is really refreshing and encouraging to see. And I think what resonates, all this time on from when it was being made, 15 to 20 years ago, is that there was an honesty and an authenticity that's just kind of sonically prevalent in the music, and that's why it still resonates with younger generations now who are getting into being inspired by that and making things that kind of almost carry on the story as if it was from 15 years ago rather than just from yesterday, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, your album Underwater Dancehall was like a classic of the genre. I mean, as far as I can think, it was sort of one of the first dubstep albums to really make an impact, right?
Yeah, I think along with Screams and Burials, it was one of the first dubstep albums, and Cyrus's as well. His album came out on Tectonic before mine. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of dubstep albums at the time, and I think culturally as well, it wasn't necessarily the most obvious format to present the music. But yeah, I have a lot of it was an important point in my life when the album was made. My father had been suffering from cancer for a long time, and he passed away, so there was sort of kind of difficulty and negativity on that side of things. But as we mentioned before, there's also this kind of new world of opportunity opening up through dubstep and DJing, and I'd never really traveled. I was kind of been to France on holiday, and Benidorm and Mallorca and Ibiza, and that was about the limit of my travel experience. And then all of a sudden I was starting to go off to all sorts of exciting new places, like all across Europe and America, and then later that year in Japan and stuff. And yeah, there was a kind of there was a lot going on around that.
To get back to Tectonic, this is a very big question, but what have you learned about running a label in 2 decades?
Yeah, I mean, there was a bunch of boring stuff that just gets you through the whole admin process, and I think from a kind of more sort of a more subjective perspective, I would say one of the important things is about having a healthy relationship with your own passion. And I think that's not an easy thing to necessarily get your head around, because when things are new, fresh and exciting, there's a lot of passion, and it's very easy to kind of like take energy from that and go and be prolific with it. But then if you find that you burn that passion out by overdoing a similar thing, for example, then you've got to kind of find a way to rebuild that momentum and interest, and you've got to look in different places to find things to be passionate about. So yeah, in an abstract way, I think probably having a healthy relationship with your own sense of passion is an important thing to keep going.
Is that because, I mean, in a way, like you I feel you were so closely associated with the label, right? You sort of you had to sort of separate that off a bit, or?
I mean, I think I kind of did it sort of slightly the other way around, in that I made music for myself, and when I sat down to make music, it was, it was kind of for myself primarily. And with the label, I think, I had more of a kind of DJing hat on, in a sense. So what I made and what I played wasn't in complete, exactly the same kind of space, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
I think that was possibly the different hat I would put on with thinking about the label. It was like having the opportunity to DJ and play music out in different contexts is a great way to sort of test drive things as well. So there's a kind of quite a reciprocal relationship between running a label and being a DJ, I think.
Well, I'd kind of forgot actually that a lot of your, well, not a lot, but some of your like earlier singles were on Planet Mu, even after Tectonic had started. Why did you decide to do that?
In truth, out of kind of like love and respect for Planet Mu, because they believed in me and wanted to put out Koali, and then later Punisher. And just, for a bit of context, I mean, Koali turned out to be one of my, all-time most successful tracks. It's, even,
well, it's a classic. It's undeniably.
But I actually made that in 2004. It was one of I'd maybe made 3 or 4 tunes by myself that I would call sort of dubstep on Fruity Loops at that point. So I wasn't a very accomplished producer, if you like, but and I gave that tune out to people, and only a handful of people even cut and played it. And so, after a year or so, I'd kind of thought, well, that was that, move on. But as it happened, Mike Paradinas had heard Koali, and he just rang me up and said he wanted to put it out. And I was kind of really surprised, to be honest. And he had that sort of belief in it, and the release with Punisher did really well. And he actually asked that perhaps the initial idea that had got into my head about making an album came from him, and said, yeah, I think you should do an album for us. And as I started working on it, I thought, well, I've got a label. If I'm going to do an album, it's got to be on my label. Otherwise, what kind of message do I send to other artists that I want to sign to the label? So, and I think there was an element of like, well, appreciated what he'd done, what that experience had given me, and wanted to sort of show some loyalty. And so when the album came out, I still did some other releases with them, just to kind of, as a sort of thank you for where they helped me get to.
Is there one Tectonic release, I'm not saying the best, but one that really kind of sums up what the label is about for you?
I mean, I'm not a big fan of this. What's your favorite this, or your top 5 that, or whatever. And I think there's over 100 artists on the label now that put music towards it, and I think there's different moments in time where things have resonated for different reasons and in different ways. So I'm going to be very evasive and not answer that question.
So I have a mind that very much works in like lists and things like that. It's not a good thing, but I
like to keep it vague.
So we'll talk about the new compilation that's coming out, which is celebrating 20 years. It's looking forward rather than back. I mean, like one of the obvious things to have done would have been like a greatest hits, but rather than do that, it's new music. Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the intention with the label. It's, I kind of feel like you can, and I have enjoyed taking stock of the moment and looking back and digging through the old catalogue, and, playing out tracks that I haven't played out for years. But really, it is about where it's going that's more important to me than where it's been. And I think it was a great opportunity to bring together a sense of the Tectonic community past and expand it for Tectonic community in the future. And I think, for example, it was an opportunity to do lots of things like You know, it's been sort of playing on my mind for a number of years now that, you know, there really hasn't been a great female presence on the label. I mean, historically, and certainly in the first several to 10 years, I couldn't even name you a dubstep producer from that early period that was a woman, or, you know, just not a bloke. And yeah, I think, you know, I like the idea of Tectonic being a kind of community. Yes, I'm here and I'm sort of driving what happens in terms of releases and things, but it's you know, it's other people's music, so it's always about kind of bringing things together in a connective way. And I feel like there's generations of younger generations of producers now who have told me that they're, you know, influenced by the label, someone like Beatrice M, for example. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to bring them in and involve them in this kind of community and be a part of it and grow it.
And what did you say to them? Because it wasn't just like, can I have a track? It was like tracks with that were written with Tectonic sound in mind. Did you sort of like ask them? Did you give them like a brief, for want of a better word?
Not as such. I think the thing that I'm very fortunate about is that, you know, everyone that I connected to about this, you know, understands and is aware of the history of the label. And I think that there is something that comes from 20 years of releasing music in a certain way. There's a world building element. So it's almost like the unspoken space of what fits, and people have just understood, really. I mean, I think there is definitely an element that I want to kind of subjectively hope to achieve with the label and this kind of Tectonic sound branding, if you like. And I feel that historically there's been a lot of moments when the kind of music that I've been most in tune with and wanting to release on the label is the stuff that sits in between genres. It's the tracks that are beautiful music that get clumsy names like dubstep techno crossover, which, you know, just sounds like a fart in a lift, doesn't it? But I mean, or post dubstep, for that era of people who made dubstep and then got a bit fed up with what the name had become and some other stuff. So, you know, there's all these kind of clumsy titles, and I love the idea of this sort of world building and Tectonic sound just having its own resonant, self-explanatory kind of presence. So yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned post dubstep, because that is those are a couple of words I have used many a time, and I've used UK bass as well. And I think the reason for that is because I wanted to get across, you know, something to do with like dubstep that wasn't what the sort of commercial dubstep had become. I mean, what did you think of like that time? I mean, do you kind of understand why people were using those terms, or did they just seem a bit strange?
Well, they have a function, and that's why they were kind of like, you know, placeholder names. It was almost if we were waiting for something that made a bit more sense to be used. And then you get the opposite problem, which is that there's too many names for everything. So there's no kind of way of bringing these things together in a useful kind of way. So, yeah, I think that's been sort of an issue that's, if you like, there's been a degree of that happening from the offset. And, you know, I can just think back to I don't know if you remember the Reflex Grime compilations.
Oh, yeah.
And the very first one had a list of all these kind of subgenres of like sub-low 8-bar, you know, and we're going to call it grime. And the irony was that it was mostly dubstep that they were putting on there. So they kind of didn't even get that right from the offset, especially the volume 2, which was literally Digital Mystics, Loafer and Code 9 on there, which had very little to do with grime itself, which was, in my opinion, always driven by the vocals, and these were all instrumental pieces. Anyway, the point being that there was always this kind of like, there was never a great name for it. And I think perhaps in some ways, by the time it has a name, it's a bit late. So
yeah,
it's lost that kind of possibility. And I think that was the thing that was trying to be captured in the post-dubstep phase was a bunch of producers who were excited about the opportunity and possibility that dubstep had, and then, you know, several years into it, it had become kind of pigeonholed as something, and there was an expectation about what it should be, whereas actually the thing that was, you know, driving the passion behind people to engage with this was, you know, in the place of where it might go and the possibility. And you kind of lose that sense of possibility the more something gets tied down to a genre and a history of expectation that gets attached to it. So maybe you know, maybe it's good that there isn't a good name for these things, and it's a bit clumsy and it's a bit hard to talk about it because it makes it more elusive and keeps a sense of mystery then.
And going back to the compilation, which features various artists' sort of interpretation of the Tectonic sound, was there like anyone who did something that really surprised you? You're like, I didn't think, you know, in a good way. He was like, well, I didn't think that's what Tectonic is, but I like it.
I mean, there's a lot of yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to answer because I think, you know, I love every piece of music that's on the compilation. There were some tracks that surprised me. The Fiac and J Manuel track, for example, Binder. It sounds like, you know, to me, it sounds like more like Square Pusher had a fantastic day at the office, which I wasn't expecting from them. But at the same time, I think, ironically, there's an element of providing the unexpected to meet the expectations of that remit, if you like, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's so many, you know, there's so many great tracks on there. I'm really proud of every single one.
Obviously, a lot of dubstep came from Croydon, South London. You're from Bristol. Do you think that kind of gave you a different perspective on it?
Oh, definitely. You know, I mean, the earlier days of years of dubstep were entirely defined by that South London sound and Croydon, and that was where it came from. That there was something about those producers, you know, Scream and Benga and Mala, Koki and Loafer, and the kind of things that Youngster and Hatcher were playing in those very early days, that just sounded, you know, totally different. And there was something about it that, you know, it was just very special. And I think that the kind of Bristol attitude, I mean, people talk about Bristol sound, but I would say there's more of a Bristol attitude, if you like, was more about making it your own and having the confidence to sort of bring different energy to it. And I think that what blossomed here in Bristol took on so many different angles. I mean, if you think about, you know, the likes of Appleblim and Peverlist and that kind of deeper, more techno-influenced sounds that they were kind of engaging with, Headhunter, you look at Joker and Jemmy and Guido and what became that kind of purple sound. You know, those two things are so different from each other. But you could play them all in the same sort of set, and then you had like Jake's and the Hench Crew. You know, there's so much stuff going on, and it just felt like, you know, there was a great community here where people were just sort of supportive to each other, shared music, and people were playing out each other's music. So it kind of got put together in this sort of lovely jigsaw.
And I mean, one thing, again, I always loved about your work was kind of the reggae influence was always very strong in it. And you did, yeah. What was it like doing the two albums with Adrian Sherwood, who's obviously a legend of British reggae?
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up listening to On You Sound music. My older brother was a big fan of On You Sound catalogue, so I had, you know, he'd made me tape cassettes from when I was like 10 years old, and I had like Pay It All Back volumes. Pay It All Back Volume 3 I must have listened to about 2,000 times by the time I was a teenager. Dub Syndicate albums and you know, all sorts of that stuff. And it's probably some of the only music. I mean, I'm sure we can all share an experience of like outgrowing certain music tastes, especially when you're that young. But it's probably the only music that I've listened to all my life. And yeah, the back in I think 2011, I was doing Tectonic hosting rooms at Fabric on a regular basis, and I was working on this Fabric live mix. Anyway, I got asked by Sean, who was doing the bookings at Fabric. He said, well, I've got the opportunity to book Adrian Sherwood. Would you be down to have him at a Tectonic event? And I said, absolutely, of course. That would be a real honor. Unfortunately, I didn't really get to chat to him much on the night because I played directly after him. But he invited me to play an ONU event in Paris, and we hung out and got chatting, and he invited me to come to the studio in Ramsgate, which I was under the guise of come and bring some rhythms and we'll mash up some dub plates no one can play back at us, which I liked. And I think by the second day we were already doing all this other stuff that was, not dub plate but original material. And I just remember looking at him and saying, well, what do you think we're doing with this? And he said, Rob, I think we should do an album together. And yeah, that was the start of that. And I had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with Adrian, who was one of my musical heroes growing up, if you like.
And talking of reggae, you're doing the party on October the 4th in Leeds with Metalheads and Iration Steppers, which sounds like, I don't know, it sounds like quite a telling lineup, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's like a really good fit. So it's, sub-dub, and it's, I forget what their birthday is, probably like 27th or something like that. They're a bit older. And yeah, Metalheads was a label that, like, I started out on DJing jungle and drum and bass of 1999, 2000, that kind of time. And that sort of early Metalheads period was a huge influence on me. There was something about the intention in the music that I was very drawn to, and I think that early period of Metalheads was something that I wanted to recreate with Tectonic in its own space, and in a way, and on your sound, and then maybe a bit of basic channel chain reaction kind of energy. So yeah, it's great to be doing something alongside Metalheads, and then obviously Iration Steppers and Sub-Dub are such an important connection with dubstep and in the history of it as well. I mean, Simon Scott, who's one of the main promoters for the events, he was one of the first people onto dubstep and still booking and artists from 2005 all the way through to now for various events. So yeah, so a perfect fit: dub in one room, jungle in the other, Tectonic in the middle.
That is definitely going to be one for ear protection as well, I think.
Yes, you should always protect your ears.
And taking up to today, you produced No Caller ID with Trim. You worked with Trim on that EP. I think it came out under his own name, right? Rather than
yes.
Yeah. What was he like to work with? I love Trim.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of work with Trim now over the last few years. There's a whole body of stuff that's sitting on hard drive at the moment, and yeah, I've got a close relationship with Javan, and go to the pub with him, and it's more than just making the music together. So yeah, the process, I mean, I think a lot of the time I will kind of write some music, and he'll kind of figure out the figure out the vocals, and you'll come and record. You might try a few different verses, and then we feel like, oh, that resonates best, and then yeah, I'll kind of like take the parts away and work on them and fit the rhythm to move around what he's doing as well. And yeah, that's the kind of process really. But we've got quite a few things that are out now, but trust me, there's an absolute wealth of stuff yet to come out and be finished.
I've never met the man, but he strikes me as someone who would be a good person to go to the pub with.
Yeah. He's good fun, definitely. And we'll be performing together on this Friday at the Fox and Firkin as part of the Tectonic Sound launch.
Oh, amazing.
So yeah, if you're in London on Friday, 18th.
That's this Friday. Wow.
It is, yeah.
Look, it's been great to speak to you. One final question, if I may. What's it like running a label in 2025? Because we hear lots of horror stories about how difficult it is, and streaming's not paying you much, and vinyl takes 1,000,000 years to arrive. What is it like in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain elements that are, challenging, and I think that we have different sets of challenges now from when the label started and halfway through the label's life, and I'm sure there'll be other challenges that come that we haven't figured out just yet. We'll probably have like AI, you'll have the AI Tectonic that someone else will put out in a couple of years, and I'll be like, what do I do with that? But yeah, I think we live right now in an era when there is so much music being put out, and I believe I heard a statistic that says, on Spotify, every single day between 100 and 120,000 songs are released.
So it's insane.
You spend the rest of your life trying to listen to one day's worth of Spotify submissions, and you would probably not enjoy it. So my point is that actually there's never been a more relevant time for labels to exist, and I think it's an important filter and quality control element. So I think that however music becomes sold and people get remunerated, and how you kind of figure out things to go around it to make it all worthwhile, that's part of the challenge that's ever evolving. But the job and role of filtering music and presenting good quality trustable music in a space has never been more relevant, in my opinion.
Well, exactly, because you see 80,000 tracks uploaded or whatever, and something on Tectonic is going to be better than well, it is a mark of quality.
That's the ambition, definitely.
Well, look, congratulations on 20 years of the label. Hopefully in another 20 years, all being well in the world, we're not under sea or whatever, you'll be doing a 40th anniversary.
Yeah, and who knows what that'll look like, but
beamed directly to the head via...
I'll have a smile on my face if it gets there, though.
You never know.
Absolutely. Well, maybe we'll be having that chat again.
I hope so. Though I'll mark it in. I'll pencil it in the
put it in the calendar.
All right. Well, thanks very much. Nice to speak to you.
All the best.
Bye.